Okay. Welcome everybody to Communication for All. This is presented today by Linguistic Connection. We're going to be talking about how caregivers can learn to develop their child's language skills naturally throughout their day together. Thanks for being here, everybody. We're really happy to have the MNC community with us. This is the 2021 Family Chat Series, which is sponsored by MNC Mission Head Start in San Francisco. We thank you for your sponsorship and are really happy to be here together. My teammate Lucia Lainez and I, Cindy López-Chastain, are part of Team Linguistic Connection. So I wanted to introduce my co-host today, my teammate Lucia Lainez. Lucia, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, hi everybody, welcome. And I am a speech language pathologist and I am the owner of Lala Speech Therapy, Inc. I am also a consultant with Linguistic Connections, and I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you, Lucia. I am Cindy López-Chastain. I'm your co-host today. As you see, I will be leading this conversation with Lucia, and it's a really lovely conversation that I love for our MNC community. I've been a part of the MNC community for over 10 years now and have been a speech therapist in San Francisco for the last 17 years, working primarily with bilingual children. And I started Linguistic Connection because of my passion and mission to make sure that communication was accessible for all children. And so I'm really excited to be having this conversation with you today. I'm going to find out who's here with us. I'd love to find out about what age your children are. If you would like to share their name, the site that they go to, the classroom that they're in, either in distance or in person, please put that into the chat. We also love to know a little bit more about what you're all doing together these days. What is something that you enjoy doing together with your child, as well as something that you might be doing to help your child to learn to communicate. So I'll give you a few minutes to share and let other people join us. Do we want to answer those questions, Lucia?
Sure. Yeah. I can go ahead and share a little bit of what I'm doing with my son and how I communicated and what we enjoy together, especially during this pandemic where we're still in the pandemic. Right now, wearing masks, we sometimes it's hard to walk outside, but really prioritizing the sun on our face and on our bodies and the fresh air. I feel like that's really important for our own personal health and our growth. And through those walks and we have a lot of really great conversations.
Yes. It is so important to be outside together. And like you said, it's a great opportunity for building in talking and listening and sharing with your little one. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I find myself doing the same with my two boys. We get outdoors and we like to sing a lot too on our walks and try to play music anywhere we go.
That's great.
You mentioned, Lucia, that we are still in a pandemic, and we absolutely have to recognize that makes a huge impact on our community. And I just want to take a moment to mention that we're not only here today thinking about communication, but we also, as a team, are coming to you in the community, recognizing that there are a lot of challenges right now. And we want to bring not only our experience professionally, but also highlight a program called Hannon, It Takes Two to Talk, as well as make sure to bring in the perspective of our community. So we're bridging the conversation for the pandemic and the reality that we're living today, but also bringing in pieces of communication and our culture. We want to recognize that every family that might be here today comes from different places, has different priorities and different values. We also want to make sure that we're leaving you with something of value today. And we're dedicated to making sure that we have that in a respectful offering and giving you knowledge, as well as having you share with us your experiences and your knowledge too.
I think that it's really important to recognize too that as parents and caregivers, we really want to empower you as the experts of your child. So that's really important too. We want to honor that.
Yes. So with that being said, we do have some things that we'd love to cover today, and in particular around communication, that it starts with interaction. As well, we'd like to talk about how and why your child communicates, and talking a little about the stages of communication that your child might be in. And last, we're going to talk about letting your child lead. As we mentioned, there are different places we come from, and in some cultures, letting your child lead may not be a natural fit or something that you already do. So we'd love to explore that a little bit more and look at some goals today. Okay. In these goals, no matter what culture you come from, no matter what family you come from, we want to make sure that you leave with, no matter where you're coming from today, we want to make sure that you leave learning more about your child's communication and learning about how you can have your child lead. So first things first, let's think about how interaction and communication go together. When you look at this picture, go ahead and share what you see. So, Lucia, what do you see when you see this picture?
I see so much joy between what I'm going to assume is a dad or a paternal figure and this little boy, just with so much joy. They look like they're laughing out loud on the floor. They're just having a great time.
Yes, yes. And, when it comes to having that kind of a good time, especially such an intimate closeness, you cannot have this picture happen in real life if you just jump right in. You have to first start with making sure that it is an interaction that's desired and that's wanted by the little one, right? So like you said, it's somebody very close to him, obviously, because he's so there with him. And I love this picture because it really shows that interaction is the first step. Communication actually has two important components to being interaction and language. So communication is not just talking. It comes with the relationship and what meaning we bring to it through our language. Children need to learn both interacting and language. But what does it mean for you when I say that interaction needs to come first? For me, when I say that, it means that it's the first step in helping your child to communicate. It's needed before you can have the back and forth exchange with your child. Yeah. So I'm going to keep going here, and we're going to keep going. And I want you to think about what you're seeing in these parent and child interactions. What do you observe as we're watching these videos when it comes to interaction?
The wheels on the bus go round and round, round and round, round and round. The wheels on the bus go round and round, all through the town. Pop on your arm, on your head, on your nose, in baby's eye. Baby's nose.
So let's think, what did you observe here? What were your impressions while you watched these interactions? Please share. Lucia, I'm going to just sidebar that if you want to jump in at any point.
Well, some of the things that I see are, even without words, the eye contact that the child and the caregiver are starting to engage in, and the squeals and the laughter and all those without words are the interaction is so much more communication. They're saying the child and the caregivers are really saying a lot in those moments.
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that to light. It was not only in their words, but they were communicating and connecting with their body language too. Yes. And really, Did it seem like they were having fun and get
Totally. They, bubbles are just the some of the most favorite activities, and it's just you could just see how motivated they are in order to continue with this back and forth interaction.
Yes. Well, and you know what else, Lucia? It was such a balanced interaction, not only in this last one, but in all of them. There was a balance between the talking that the parents did with the nonverbal communication that they were doing. They weren't overly teaching. There was a really nice balance.
Yeah. I also saw the parents pausing too, giving them a little bit of chance. And I'm sure we're going to go back and go right into that
Sure.
down
We
the
are
line.
going to talk about that later. It's true. But thank you. That was really true. She was pausing a lot and giving time.
Yeah.
But the real take home about it is that first, the interaction was established at the start. There was interaction. It was not about the language. It was about the interaction, like you said, Lucia, through a nonverbal way. And then the language was added. So the first step that we're going to talk about today is going to continue to be around how to build that interaction so that we can build our children's language. Okay? And what do children need? Children need a lot of things, but in this conversation, we're really going to look at that. The first thing is that children need interaction. And I put enjoyable in parentheses for a reason, because life is not always enjoyable and situations are not always enjoyable, but they're always teachable moments. And even upsetting and challenging interactions are interactions. I like to remind us that when children don't get interaction, a positive one, they'll find ways to make interaction happen. Even when it's negative, it's still interaction, and children seek that. So children really do need interaction. Children also need a reason to communicate. If there's no reason, why would you communicate? Children, lastly, but not least, need a way to communicate. If you have a reason to communicate, but don't have a way to communicate, then also your message is not heard. So these are really three important things that children need for their communication. Lucia, is there anything you would like to add?
Just what came to mind to me when you're talking about an enjoyable or sometimes unenjoyable interaction is, the common tantrum. That is them communicating that they're frustrated or that they're, having a hard time or whatever. And it's, maybe they can't use their words in that moment, but they're using their whole body language, or they're using their whole body to let you know that they don't like it. So, recognizing that your child is, by whatever means necessary, going to try to communicate and interact with you and get your attention.
Precisely. Exactly. And there are different ways and different reasons that children communicate, and we're going to talk about that right now. So, but first, let's think about some ways that we communicate, even as adults. When we think about communication and how we communicate, let's imagine a birthday party. Have you ever been to a loud party or even been in a loud situation at all? And if you can imagine yourself there in that scenario, and imagine that you're trying to get someone at that party or in that situation to leave with you. Okay? How would you communicate to that person if they cannot hear your words at all? You're unable to talk to them and explain it. How do you see that you would communicate with them? So go ahead and take a few moments just to imagine yourself in that scenario and share when you're ready.
Well, I know for myself, my family loves a large Latin party, and sometimes the music is blasting, the kids are wild and everything, and I'm ready to go. So what I usually do is I'll go right next to the person that I'm with, and I'll either kind of yank at them or try to get their eye contact and just kind of start giving them the head nod of like, it's time to go. Just kind of looking at my watch and just a polite smile, but it's ready. I'm ready.
Exactly. So Lucia, in the speech therapy world, and for us, we call that, nonverbal communication or sign language or gestures, and that is really for us as speech therapists, a huge aspect of communication, and it's sometimes even what we teach our kids to use. Can you all see that how we communicate as adults when we don't have words available is through pointing and nodding, gesturing, and all the other examples that were given? I think you even said taking someone, grabbing them, right? So these are ways that pulling at someone, yes. So this is how we as adults communicate in a situation where we're unable to use our words. So now let's switch and think about our kids. You saw that you communicated in so many different ways. What are some ways how do your children communicate? None of them with words. Okay. Since it's not just about talking, we're going to talk a little bit more about this now. Oops. Sorry about that. I'm skipping around. So when it comes to our children, let's think of some real examples. So let's think about today. How did your child communicate with you today? So take a moment to think about the last time you saw your child and what they might have done to help to communicate to you. I'm thinking for my son, he smiled at me and gave me a big hug because he hadn't seen me for a while, and I've been working, and that's how he first communicated to me when he saw me.
I'm even thinking about my son, and I've been in this room, and he's been in the other part of our home, and he just started yelling, "Mom, Mom!" And I did attend to him at that moment, so he got louder until finally he got my attention. So
yes. So for our children, they may or may not use words to communicate, and we do know that sometimes crying, right? Maybe some of the children communicate through looking, through those facial expressions, the smile or the pout. There are so many ways, the gestures and pointing, right? Depending on how much language your child has already, they may or may not use words to communicate. And we want to just make sure that we can continue to notice that is communication. Okay? So now let's think a little bit more about why. Why does your child communicate? And before we do that, let's again think about our own selves. When you make a phone call or send a text message, why? Why do you do that? Why do you communicate through a phone call or a message? Take a moment to think about the reasons that you communicate.
sometimes I send messages or initiate phone calls to get information from someone or to give some information. Sometimes I call my mom because I need a little bit of love and support in that moment, or I'm frustrated to communicate my feelings. Yeah, those are some things off the top of my head.
Thank you, Lucia. Yes, exactly. When we stop and think about, our day or our week and when we made those phone calls and why, you would see that perhaps you had a question to ask that needed to be answered. Perhaps it was to make a request, to ask something of someone. Like you said, maybe you needed information. Maybe you needed to protest or to, like you said, to complain about something. Maybe you needed to let something off your chest. That's some of the reasons. And perhaps you just wanted to say hi to someone. There's so many reasons that we communicate through phone calls and through text messaging. And there's many reasons that we do, just like our little ones. So children also communicate for different reasons, and these develop more and more over time, right? So let's think a little bit about why your child communicates. Let's think about, again, your child today, and think about one reason. What is one reason that your child communicated with you today?
I know for my child, he was hungry and he couldn't find something or couldn't reach something. So he was calling for my attention so I can help him with that.
Perfect. Thank you. Sometimes an example would be, what if a little one today, during lunch with you, pushed away their food, what would have been the reason? It would have been to say, I don't want any, to protest, to say no. So you're mentioning that your son was hungry and he needed food. That would be one reason. And then it could also be that the child isn't hungry or doesn't want something. That could be another reason that they communicate. So think also about the things that your child asked for. What were some things that they wanted or didn't want. Those are really common reasons that children in the early years, the toddler and the preschool years, communicate. They talk about what they want, what they need, and they ask for help. Okay? There are many other reasons children communicate, but we're going to watch some videos. We're actually not going to watch some videos. We're not going to watch videos. This would be a great time to show videos of the families that we work with. So so let's see, what else do I want to say? Okay, so really the idea that our children are communicating for a variety of reasons and using many ways to communicate, not just their words. For some, they don't have their words yet, or their words are not clear. So they really do rely on many ways to show you and tell you what they need and what they want. So here's a little summary of some of the general reasons and common reasons that children will communicate, as well as how they communicate when their words are not always there. Yeah. Lucia, is there anything you'd like to add or anything coming to mind as you're seeing these lists about how and why children communicate?
How does your child communicate? By pointing, shaking your head, let's see, leading by hand, facial expressions, counting. I think volume. Volume is a big piece that comes to mind. If sometimes the louder they get, the more insistent they're like, hey. But then at the opposite end, if they're just really soft and maybe they're next to you and they just want to be playful, they kind of learn to get your attention and maybe request some affection that way as well.
I love that. I love that. You're mentioning something that's so subtle, that's so nonverbal, but has to do with our voice, that many times gets overlooked. And it is something that's so communicative. If we're yelling versus whispering, if we are speaking with an angry tone versus speaking with a calm tone. So we're talking about the voice, and that holds so much communication meaning. Not only how we use our voices, but you're talking about how the children use their voices too. And it's really about tuning in, right? For us, the adults, parents, teachers, for community members, for aunties, for uncles, for us, the adults, to tune in to how and why our child is communicating through other ways, not just thinking about the words that they're saying or not saying. So thank you for sharing that, because this is how we will know what our children are trying to tell us and understand their messages. All right. And we know that you're here today because you're interested in communication and how to support your child's communication, and your child may or may not be using words yet, or using words effectively or easily. And we want to remember and remind you that the process for learning language can take different paths. And just like riding a bike, we don't start right away, hop on and go. There are steps and different stages. And if you think about, if you have ridden a bike in your life, or if your child or an older child has ridden a bike, think about what happens as they get to the stage of being independent on their bike. How was the process to learning to ride a bike? Think about that for a moment, and please share about what it took to get to riding that two-wheel without any training wheels. How did it go for you or for a child in your life?
I know for my child, there were a lot of tears. There were a lot of tears, a lot of feeling nervous and unsteady, he wanted me to be really close by to him. or even hold the back of his bike to make sure that he continued to go wherever he wanted to go. And if I tried to let go, that felt really nervous. And he'd let me know by using his voice, sometimes his volume, sometimes the tears.
Yes. Yes. Oh, you're so right. That's very similar to how it went for my oldest son too. And when we learn to do anything new, really, something new, there usually is a series of steps or a process to learning that, right? So I want to remind us that we are also learning something new today. We are, as the adults, learning something and looking at a new way to think about language, a new way to think about communication. And our children may be on a similar journey with their own communication. So respecting that learning is a process and that we can take steps to get to the goal. In this conversation, we'll do that together. And with our children, as they're on their communication path, we'll also help them along the way. And today we're going to talk more about how we can help them. Okay. So now we're going to turn to look at the idea that we have 4 stages of communication. And in Hannon, which is the program that I'm referring to, It Takes Two to Talk, they break down communication in this way. And I'd love to share a little bit more about what these stages are and how we can understand them for our children's communication. So the first one is called the discoverer. And we're going to talk more about what each stage looks like. The second one is a communicator. The third one is the first words user, and then the combiner. So let's dig in a little bit and find out more about each of the stages. Okay. Looking at these stages, we're going to explore what your child understands and what they express as they are in each stage. We're going to start with a little one named Zarina. And actually, I think mom is Zarina. We're going to watch a little one who is a discoverer, and we're going to ask ourselves this question. Do Zarina and Maverick communicate with a specific purpose in mind? Okay, let's find out. Let's see if you can hear. So what is the communication that is being communicated?
There is Annie. Bingo! You did, yeah. That was so good. Now you're looking for something? Huh? You want something? Really? Oh. Shake, shake, shake.
So that was Zarina in the beginning. This is Maverick.
Shake, shake, shake. Shake, shake, shake. Shake, shake, shake.
Okay. So what do you think? Do you think that Zarina and Maverick communicated with a specific purpose in mind?
Well, definitely. Well, really, every stage is going to be my favorite, but the discovery stage is one of my first favorites because it shows the parent or the caregiver that their baby or their child is ready to play. They're ready to engage. They're ready to interact. Sometimes they're looking at them through eye contact. Sometimes they're using their voice in a very intentional way. But they just want to keep it going. That's what I saw.
Absolutely. The communication was about play, and it was about keeping the interaction going. So even though, they might not have had a specific communication in mind, for them it was about play, which is what they were communicating. So let's look a little bit more about discoverers. let's talk a little bit more about discoverers. I wonder if anyone in the group would have a discoverer at home. Usually discoverers have less verbal language or no verbal language, and they're at the stage where, like Lucia said, they really use their body language, they use their voice, they use their facial expression to interact and engage. So one of the things is that they don't always have a very specific communication intent. However, the one that is always there is interaction. And as you understand how the discoverer uses their nonverbal communication, you will start to see that they do react to what's happening in their environment. They do make sounds and movements, and that is and moving and reaching towards things. That is intentional. Okay. They may not always understand your words. For discoverers, the idea of the language system is a challenging one, and they're learning how to understand language and how to use it. But they do respond to the sound of your voice, just like Lucia said. And you also will see that a discoverer is going to understand and start to understand gestures, as well as understanding what's going to happen in their routine, especially when routines are the same and consistent. They'll be able to predict what's coming next, for example. So is there anything you'd like to add, Lucia, before we move into looking at the next stage?
Yeah, I think at the discover stage, like you mentioned, even though the words aren't there, the vocalizations are, the and the mms are there, and those are the foundational sounds that any child needs in order to develop those more complex words and sounds. And I think also what they're responding to in terms of the caregiver's words or even their interactions, they're really responding to affect, and they're really responding to the caregiver's way that they're engaging. So it's like, oh, do you want more? Instead of, do you want more? Type of thing. They're not responding to, do you want more? It's, oh, do you want more? I think you're looking for something. That's what they're responding to, and that's what what's going to continue to captivate their motivation and their interaction, and they want more.
Absolutely. You know, you're making me think of something really important. We may have families or teachers who work with infants, and you know, these 4 stages, they do apply to the developmental process of language. And it may be that an infant is at the stage. All infants start at the discoverer stage, of course. And so as they move through, we want to think about the developmental process, and that this is an early stage for all children. This is how we all start with language. And there may be some children and families who have children that are older, but because of other reasons, they have not developed their verbal language skills yet, and they may be at the discoverer stage. So we're not talking about ages today. We're really talking about the level of communication, and that could apply for the discoverer to an infant who's a newborn, and it could also apply to an older child who has not yet mastered some of the language areas and some of the developmental areas, but they are learning to communicate and using the communication through these ways that we just talked about.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, especially when thinking about our MNC community and how diverse our families and our little ones are. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So we know that some children may move through these stages more slowly, and that they will make progress over time. And next, going to learn a little bit about the communicator. So the next stage from the developer to the communicator, and her name is Elena. And let's think, as we watch this video, how does Elena communicate? And what does she understand?
Up, you up. Up. 1, 2, 3. Up. 1, 2, 3. Up. Nose. I'm gonna touch Alina's nose. Nose. Where's Mama's nose? Nose.
So let's think about that. What did you notice about how Elena communicates and what she understands?
I really loved how Elena was so interested in mom's mouth, the way she was looking at it move, the way she was looking at what her facial expressions were. She was starting to imitate mom in a different way and starting to use her sounds and her body language too. So it wasn't just her words; it was her body language being like, "I want more, give it to me, come on."
Absolutely. She was using so many ways to communicate. And did you feel like she was showing what she understood? What did you notice about what she could understand?
I think she understood, especially in the first video, up, where if she raised her hands and she's like, ah, and then she tried again, up, and then even mixed it up a little bit at the tail end of pa. So she's exploring and being really excited about up, the concept of up, and again, by whatever means necessary, really trying to get mom's attention, to do this back and forth piece where if she says something, mom hears her, mom sees her, mom understands her.
Yes, she has really made that communication connection, right? Where the connection of that what she shows, what her meaning of communication is, has an effect on other people. In this case, on mom.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So let's keep going. So as you can see, the connection for communication has been made for the communicator. They send a message now without using words, but they're reaching, pointing, making sounds, gesturing, looking, and using their facial expression, which is communication, right? They are a communicator now, even though it may not be through specific words. But they also are able to shift from you and an object and show that they're interested in people and in things too. And she also, Elena clearly showed us that communicators are able to understand some familiar words. Okay. Let's keep going and think about first word users now. So we mentioned that communicators and discoverers don't quite have words yet. The difference between discoverer and communicator, the primary one, is the ability to make that real jump from communication symbolic meaning into an intentional communication to make an effect on another person, a very big one. Yet now we're talking about first words. So this is going to be the next stage of from discoverer to communicator to first word user. Well, this little one is called, his name is Charlie. And how does Charlie communicate in this video? And what does he understand? Let's see what Charlie and his mom have to do.
Airplane. Did you ride on an airplane?
Yeah.
Was it fun?
I did.
You want to do it again?
Yeah.
Me too. We'll do it again.
Dada.
With Dada?
Yeah.
You want to go back to DEI? Yeah.
So Charlie is communicating with some words. You heard a couple of words, Dada and his attempt at saying airplane. What else did you notice about how Charlie communicated?
One of the things that I noticed was that he could respond to mom's questions. So did you like that? Or did you hear that? He's like, yeah. So really simple, yeah, or I didn't hear no, but I like that he's motivated by what she's asking him about. Yeah.
Yes. And that really points to that question about what does he understand? It shows that he's able to understand language. He was able to also imitate some of what mom said. And that was a big difference too. So let's take a look at the difference for first word users. They're still using just one word at a time or one sign. It may be a word, it may be a gesture, but just one at a time. And they also are now at a stage where they can imitate whatever you say or whatever you show, they're able to also do that. And they're starting to show a difference in how much they can understand about the symbolic language and understanding directions. You also mentioned questions, Lucia, that they can understand some simple questions too.
I did notice too that a lot of his words were about like familiar people and familiar objects. So that's one of the things that I noticed that first word users really start to develop around this time, just really prioritizing their favorite stuff, their favorite, not that he doesn't love mama more than dada, but dada he loves. And, aya or airplanes he loves. And same thing with the water. Those are all his favorite objects and people.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. That what matters to him.
So let's
We're
try.
going to now see the last stage, and this is called the combiner stage. And in this video, we have Valora and her father, and we're going to also ask the same question: how does she communicate, and what does she understand? Okay.
Bigger.
Which one's bigger? This one's bigger? Let's try this one.
This is bigger.
Oh, that is bigger.
That is bigger.
Oh, let's drink. All right. Use spoon. All right.
So just like in the prior video where we're looking at the first word user, and we know that some of the words were simplified for Charlie when he said them. They were kind of a simplified version of the adult version of the word. You might have found that Valora was not so easy to understand sometimes, and that still can be a common piece, that children are simplifying some of their sounds, and the way that we understand them may be a little bit different. But taking that into account, what did you notice was different about the combiner and how Valora communicated compared to Charlie?
Well, one of the things I noticed that Valora was doing a little bit different than Charlie was really taking a bit more of the lead in the interactions, and she was almost like the boss, almost like the teacher, or maybe the adult format, in a pretend play format like this. And so she was telling Dad what to do. This one right there, take that, and even the way she was playing was a little bit more advanced. So she's mixing, she's scooping. And again, I say that because those are nonverbal ways that she's communicating, in addition to the way that how the longer phrases and the longer utterances that she is communicating verbally too.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lucia. Something else about Valora, she did have some great phrases. This one is bigger and daddy's bigger, And she also, I don't know if anyone caught this, but there was a phrase that she used that was not in English. She is a bilingual learner. She did use a phrase in Mandarin. Her family is bilingual. And in response to that phrase, Dad responded in English about the cup and drinking from the cup. And so it sounded per the example that she is using also phrases in Mandarin. So that is something that we see in our community, a lot of bilingual children. And what we will say about that is what we expect for all children, regardless of language background, is that to become a combiner, we have this kind of magical number that we look for, and it's about 50 words. And by the time children reach that 50-word signs, pictures, or actual spoken words, verbal words, that's when they start to combine ideas. That's when they start to combine their words to make phrases and sentences. And we see that with, like you said, about the first word users, starting with the things that are important to them, building that 50-word vocabulary. And then once they get there, they start to be able to mix and match their words. So saying things like my cup or my airplane, daddy go, those become the next level where they become into the stage of the combiner. So for Valora, it is very clear that she is understanding more concepts, some more simple questions. Dad asked her several questions, And she's also able to understand some concepts like in, on, little, big. So her vocabulary has grown to at least 50 words, and we can see that through the way that she's communicating with dad. Is there anything else that anyone would like to share or add?
I just love that dad is eating and having tea time with or food, a meal with the little girl, with Valora. Yeah, that's great.
Yes. The amount of play, like you said, the way that she's playing is more sophisticated, and you can see that with each stage, the communication and the language level increases, and the play is part of that. The way that they're interacting, Lucia, like you mentioned, continues to evolve as well. So that brings us to the summary for combiner, that they are using at least 2 to 3 words together, or signs as well together. The idea is that they're combining their language, that they now understand more questions and directions without the use of gestures and help, and that they're understanding new concepts. Now we're going to move right into what does it take to really continue to develop our little ones' interaction skills as they evolve as learners. And we're going to do a little activity. So when we were in person times of learning, we would have done this differently, but we love having the opportunity to do different ways of learning. And as we know, this is one way that we're learning now is through Zoom and video. And so thinking about what it takes to have interaction and communication on video and Zoom, we're going to do a little activity, and we're going to notice our position and our position and where our faces are and where our eyes are, where our bodies are, even on video.
This is going to be great. Yeah, because even especially with our distance learner families, everyone wants to really pay attention, because this is going to help your child really tune in to their classes. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Lucia. There are so many families right now in distance learning, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more. So for now, we're going to do a little activity, a little experiment, and let's just start by thinking about something that you can share. Everybody's going to have a turn, but Lucia and I are going to do this together. So let's see, Lucia, would you like to sit or stand?
I wouldn't mind sitting.
Okay, so I will stand up, and I'm going to tell you about something that I like to do with my son. And while I'm talking, I'm going to also come back to sit down, and then we can take turns, okay?
Okay.
So I love to do art with my older son, and I love to go to the beach and move around and do musical stuff with my younger son. Both of them are very, very active boys, and they keep me on my toes all the time. But my very favorite thing to do with them is to read and to tell stories, and actually to cook with them. I really love making food together with my boys. They can make me laugh about everything. So we always have humor as part of what we do. That's another big part of what I love with my kiddos. So now we're going to try something else. Lucia, why don't you go ahead and stay sitting down, but this time instead we're going to take turns, but this time you can just turn off your video while you tell me something that you enjoy or like to do with your son.
Okay. So my video is off right now, but one of the things I really like to do with my son is make a meal together. So I'm sure you can see this right now of how I'm mixing what I like to mix, or let's see. He loves to make and show me how to make fried rice. He has a special recipe that he likes to do, and he likes to mix it up sometimes, just like this. There you go.
Thank you, Lucia. I wonder how that was. So let's see, what made it difficult for you? Let's start with when I was standing up. What made it difficult about having a conversation with me when I was standing up and not on the video? My face was not part of the video.
Well, first off, I couldn't see your face. And every time you moved around, you got a little bit quieter. And I just didn't feel so connected to you in that moment when you're telling me one of your favorite things that you like to do with your son.
Yeah. It felt the same for me. Like I wasn't sure if you could see me. I wasn't able to connect with you either. How did the conversation change for you when I came face to face?
When you were face to face, it automatically I felt driven to look into your eyes and look into and to hear you in a different way, hear you much louder, and just really understand the message that you were trying to tell me.
Great. I will say that the same thing happened for me when your video was off. I was really trying my best to listen to you, but then you gave an example that you were showing something, and I had no idea what you were showing me. I was, trying to imagine it, and I wasn't sure if I was correct at what I was imagining. So I had to really stretch my mind to make up what you might be doing. I noticed that was also causing a difference in my connection with you and my understanding of what you were trying to say.
Yeah, absolutely. I had to catch myself a few times when I was talking very general and what I would have usually done about using my hands and just showed you something, and talk about something really generally like this or that. I really had to take that pause and explain it more. And even then, it would have been really hard to explain.
Yeah, it makes me think about, our distance learners and the families that we know are doing distance learning, and the teachers, and bringing us to really the next point of the conversation, which is, what do we think conversations might feel like to children? So, thinking about online conversations on Zoom, as well as thinking about in person, when we're in person right now and in these days that we're living. And some everyday kind of conversations that we have at home too. So we have a couple scenarios to think about. And when we think about what it's like for our little ones out in the world right now, we do know that we're all wearing masks. And that changes how much we can see and what we can see about each other's faces.
And what we can hear too. Yeah.
Yes, our voices sound muffled. They don't sound the same. When we have an actual barrier over our mouths, it affects how anyone can hear. And if somebody has a hearing loss, even more. So that's something to think about, and how we can speak louder, slow down, make sure that we're still using our face as much as possible, because our eyes do communicate expression, using our gestures and that nonverbal interaction that we talked about. And while we are in this Zoom learning and distance learning, we also have to think about that our videos and having the video on and having our faces in the video makes a difference, as well as what we hear and what our children hear makes a difference. So there's many things to think about right now that may be new when it comes to conversations. Anything else about that?
Yeah, it's so hard again in COVID, during the pandemic right now. And I just really want to empathize with the families right now, recognizing that, thinking about our distance learning families, that sometimes they're accessing it on a small phone, well, maybe a bigger phone, but just the entire class through a phone. Sometimes the Wi-Fi or the connection is really off, and that can be really a barrier to connecting. Those are some of the things that I keep thinking about. And the mask piece, we can't dismiss the fact that these masks, as much as they are keeping us safe, it is also something that we that we need to consider in terms of space, and the closeness of how we engage with our own children and the students, from a teacher to student space too. What I'm noticing too is maybe from here to here, it's a little bit more challenging. And so either changing your volume and having it a little bit louder, a little bit more vocal, or especially with a little child and an adult, getting down to their down to their level physically in order to be able to give them a better message, a clearer message. I think those are some small strategies that we as therapists are so used to, but we also forget in this pandemic too.
Absolutely, absolutely. And those are strategies, like you said, that have been part of teachers and therapists strategies for some time. And now we have to just remember them and bring them back more intentionally, as a way to almost to counter, the effects of the differences that we're having in conversations these days. You mentioned position, and that is a huge one. For these two other pictures, as you see on the screen, we have still everyday interactions with our children, and or nannies or babysitters or aunties, or what is the position that our little ones are in, and what is that like for them, with a stroller. We see a lot of strollers, and we do a lot of pushing of little ones, but they're not facing us, they're facing outward. What about when we're reading with them? The position that little ones are in, again, they're not looking at our faces. And we just talked about how important that is to have that face-to-face time. So when you mention going down to the level of the little ones, that is such a great strategy. And we're going to talk a little bit more about why that face-to-face time is important.
I'm so glad that we're going to be talking about this, because again, in COVID, adapting the activities that we've been doing, even thinking about screen time of maybe using the tablet and YouTube videos, the difference between having the tablet or a phone on a child's lap and then just looking down, as opposed to a parent being side by side with them and them even looking together or singing together. That is, at the very least, they can kind of engage a little bit differently, as opposed to, again, the phone being down on the lap and the child only looking down, and it's not interactive. So that's something that COVID realities, maybe a little bit extra screen time. How do we adapt? How do we adapt to that?
Absolutely. Especially because the interactive piece, like we said at the start, interaction first in order for language to happen. And yes, we can make a difference in that by adapting some small things, really. Okay, so let's look and see what getting face to face is about, like we talked about, and why. Really about connecting and sharing moments, as well as it gives us a sense and a knowledge of what our child is interested in, what matters to them. We can also see what the child's message is and what they're trying to tell us, especially when their words are not clear or they don't have that language yet. So much more important to be able to really see what's happening and hear what's happening, helping us to understand it helps our child to understand what we're saying as well. So we talked about the importance of the understanding, and that face-to-face time gives the child the ability to see us and to also help themselves to know what we're thinking and trying to communicate. So many reasons for this face-to-face time. And this picture is so great. I love the image of the dad with his little one having a really special moment, having popsicles, because as you can see, he's down at her level, like you said, Lucia, and he's making eye contact with her. She is saying something, perhaps a sound, using her body language too. Anything else that anybody notices?
This is just the prime position to imitate the facial gestures, the expressions, the joy, and the actions and the words. This is prime opportunity, prime positioning. I love this as well.
Yeah. And it's not even, I like how it's not even a direct face, in front. It's on the sides, like you talked about with the iPad, with a book. That's a nice way to create that L, thinking of the word love and the L shape, making an L shape and having it be a way to share and engage where you can both see something. So we're going to look and see some examples about how some parents position themselves face to face with their children. So those are some really nice examples. I almost want to pause them. But what did you notice about the different examples? The children, what did you notice about the children? What did you notice about the parents? What did they do to get into those positions?
You know, one of the biggest markers that I saw was, well, exactly the prioritizing that face-to-face, prioritizing that body language, getting down to the ground at the child's, eye level to be able to, okay, now this is where we're engaging, and now this is where we're communicating. I think that's something that as a therapist, that's where I'm working. That's where we start. That's where I'm modeling. And because this is a foundational piece. Yeah.
It really does allow our children to connect with us and to become aware of our presence and of our interactions, and us to become aware and interactive with them. Yeah.
I will say too, working with different types of populations and working with different cultures and ethnicities and people that are coming from different lived experiences, this can feel a little uncomfortable. This can feel a little uncomfortable because maybe they did not experience this, themselves as a child, or it's just not so familiar. And that's okay. That's okay. Especially when we're working and considering this is a different learning curve for us as adults too.
Yes.
To be able to continue to support our child and meeting them where they're at in that moment.
Absolutely, Lucia. That's why we started with thinking about what the different cultural values are and what our perspectives are, because this is a different way to communicate and different way to interact. First of all, a different way to interact with our little ones. And we will continue to talk a little bit more about some of the strategies that would enhance interactions. But again, keeping in mind what is valuable and appropriate for each family. Okay. So one of the biggest things is that the next step is to help our children to learn how to take the lead in an interaction. As you can see, before this slide, we talked about the different types of conversations and things that we don't necessarily love about some conversations. We're going to show some videos, and we can also edit these if we wanted. Because this is a video that shows an interaction that maybe the little one who's in this video might say, "Mom, I really wish that you wouldn't." And we're going to fill in the blank. Let's see if we can imagine what she would be saying if she could.
Time to wash the plates. Are you bringing stuff for me to wash? Yeah. Okay. Time. Put corn in the water. Spoon in the water. I'm gonna squeeze my sponge again. Watch. Look at all the water come out. Oops! Don't do that. Keep the water in here. No. Okay. Don't be nasty with the water. You have to keep it in here. No dumping water. No dumping water.
So what would you say? What would you say that her name is Victoria, this little one. What would Victoria say to her mom that she didn't appreciate?
I think, well, in that moment, I would assume that Victoria would maybe say, can I just do it my way?
Yeah.
Can I try it my way, or can I try it my way? Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. It makes me think of, what we were saying, that for many adults, what they don't enjoy about conversations, and, when somebody takes over for them or interrupts them. And that seems to be a little bit of what Victoria might be thinking, just let me try it my way. Yeah.
And I hear as a mom, I hear
Yeah.
the discomfort in the mom's voice of that messy play. I hear
Yes.
it, and it's valid.
Yeah, she just doesn't want it to get wet. Maybe in the carpet, so many reasons. It's such a, as a mom myself, guilty. How many times have I tried to prevent a mess, right?
Yeah.
But when our little ones are playing, it really, if they could tell us to let them be, they would, wouldn't they?
Yeah, playing and learning. Yeah, they're learning. Yeah.
They really are. For our little ones, it is play is their learning. Yeah. So we're going to see a different video, and Victoria's mom does something a little bit different this time. And let's see what effect it has on Victoria.
Okay. There we go.
You're making fries. Pizza, yum. Can I have some?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Me.
You're gonna have some too. More pizza.
Fries?
More fries. Thank you.
What was different about this interaction between Victoria and her mom?
It was a world of difference. I noticed that mom was really, instead of taking that lead, she was really waiting for Victoria to say something, and then she would respond. That's a huge difference. And you heard so many more phrases and so many more words coming from Victoria.
Yes, I noticed that effect was huge. It was very noticeable. What happened with Victoria, like you said, in her language. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I also noticed too that I think we were talking about before was that mom was not so worried about that mess. So she just looked so much more relaxed too. She would just let the opportunity to play and to engage and to learn, just unfold.
Yes, it's amazing what such a small adaptation can do. Just adding that blanket, that towel or that blanket, whatever it may be, to help mom just really be there, focusing on the interaction, not worried about making a mess or, destroying the carpet. What a difference that was. And it was such a small thing that made a difference. Great. What we're talking about with the pausing and the adjustment of the interaction, and like you said, being able to really listen and be aware of what Victoria was interested in, that is really what we saw. And it is a big piece of what we talk about when it comes to letting your child lead the way. When we say that, we're really talking about three main things that we're going to highlight, and that is observing, waiting, and listening. And the way to remember these three important things are to think of the OWL, which is the acronym or the first three letters of these 3 points. OWL, observe, wait, and listen. And when these 3 points are in place, it allows us to really let our child take the lead in communication. So let's look a little bit more about what each of these are. When you're observing, you are really asking, what is your child interested in? What are they drawn to? What is your child trying to tell you? Now, we're going to think of these each through those stages, right? So what does the discoverer have to say, and what are they interested in? What is the communicator, the first word user, the combiner? So thinking from those stages, how do we observe our children through these questions? Okay. So for observing, you might say that it really means paying close attention, and the OWL is a great visual to remember because of their big eyes and the way that they really tune in. And so that's really being an owl with your little ones and observing and paying attention to what those cues and nonverbal ways of communicating are. Lucia, is there anything else you'd like to add about this subtle but very powerful strategy?
I think by observing, this is a piece where That is just so important, especially when we have so many things to consider throughout the day. Sometimes when you finally get home and you just have to do laundry, to wash the dishes, I don't know, to make dinner, to take care of your other kids, taking those pauses to observe your child are going to be very, it's going to be such a shift and very empowering for you to have a better understanding of what your child's needs are and what they're going to try to say with or without words. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. And when we move on to thinking about, we know that the best way to observe is to be face to face. And then we're going to ask the next question about waiting and why wait? We really want to know that waiting is very important. We saw that in the examples with Victoria, taking those pauses. Why would we wait? Well, it gives the child an opportunity to start interacting with us. Okay. It gives them also the opportunity to respond. And what are we waiting for? What do you think that we're waiting for?
Waiting is so hard for some people, especially as adults. Sometimes literally counting in my head to 5,
Yes.
and then being pleasantly surprised by what, while waiting in that moment, which may or may not feel comfortable or intuitive for us, you may see a different response from your child or a different interaction with your child.
Thank you. Yeah, it is so true. And like you said, as therapists ourselves, we also must wait. And I have these little elephants here because sometimes I'm asked, how long? How long do I have to wait? And I have 5 little elephants here that we can use as guides. 1 elephant, 2 elephant, 3 elephant, 4 elephant, 5 elephants, giving that at least 5 seconds of waiting time, which will feel like a long time for some people, like you said. But it makes such a difference for some little ones who really need that extra time to show some interaction and to start to lead the interaction. We also want to say that, what does that look like, right? What does that look like? It might look different for different people. So thinking that face to face and what that looks like, and we are going to see some videos that will help us also to look at different ways that different parents wait and observe. Okay. But the idea is that we want to give children the chance to show us more of what they're interested in, right? It's really about getting to know your child and having them show us what is motivating and important and matters to them, because that is what they want to communicate about. And that's what we're going to build language from, something that's important to them. Okay. So let's keep looking at the next. We did O, observe, W, wait. Now it's going to be listen. So once we have observed and waited, we're going to listen. Why is listening important? Why is listening important? Well, of course, we know that it's to understand our child's message, but what about if they're not using words, right? We can listen. I like to say we can listen with our eyes. Of course, we listen with our ears, but we also listen with our eyes. We listen also for sounds, not just words, but the sounds. We listen for the voice and the tone of the voice. There's so much that we listen to. We also, by listening, show our children that their message is important. Okay? So what might you hear if you're listening?
One of the things that I think about when I listen is, for example, with an explorer, how they're using their voice, versus or all those different things. As silly as they sound, they all mean something different.
Yes. Our discoverers really do. When we start to listen to those sounds, we see that they have a whole another meaning than perhaps we first thought, right? And what if you don't understand your child's message? What do you think about that? If that's happened to you, what What does that like? What would that be?
Sometimes when I don't understand a child, I can say, oh, and so even that, oh, where I'm saying, oh, but my face is saying like, I don't quite understand what you're saying. It's showing them, it's communicating to them, maybe try again.
Yes, yes, yes. Parents often ask this question, or teachers as well, what do I do when I can't understand a child? And I would say that something also that we can do is to observe the situation. Sometimes children, again, are using nonverbal ways to communicate, and we can interpret some of that message that way. We can also imitate them and see if that helps them to clarify their message, like you said, to try another way to say it. And sometimes it's okay to say, I didn't understand. Can you show me, or can you take me, so that they can start to use more than just their words if they're only relying on words.
Yeah, I love how you said listening with your eyes, because there's a lot of kids that are using their pointer or their their body language. Their body language. So.
Yes. And in later sessions, we're going to talk about how we can interpret messages. But even still, just starting with the listening and making sure that we understand that our children are communicating to us, not necessarily through words, and starting to listen with our eyes is a big, big step. Okay? So as we are looking at our children in a new way and interacting with them in a new way, allowing them to lead, it's through through observe, waiting, and listening, that we give them the opportunity to lead. And when we let children lead, it's actually how they can get the language that they need from us. So when children lead the way, they are able to receive the language that they need from us. Okay? Children who lead get the language they need.
Like that.
I know, right? I love that. Like, letting your child lead. When you let your child lead, it means that you're taking the focus away from pressuring them to talk and forcing them to talk, but instead you're really allowing them to find communication from inside. They're going to talk and show you, maybe not talk, but show you, maybe make a sound, maybe demonstrate through their face. They're going to show different ways about what matters to them. The communication will come from inside. Oftentimes, Lucia, I'm sure you've seen this, when we pressure children to talk, what happens?
This is great. I was just thinking about all the times, either myself or an adult, when the child is a little quiet or a little bit shy, we're just asking them questions. And what do? It's usually or but that's it. Or maybe a yes or a C or a no, but that's it. As opposed to maybe describing something and really just putting that pause, that observe piece, and waiting for them to communicate in the way that they're able to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And a lot of times when somebody continues to pressure, it makes them talk less, doesn't it?
Yeah,
it does.
For sure. Yeah. Well, sometimes with their body, they'll show you, they'll turn away, they'll maybe go into a different room, or they'll just disengage.
We're going to see a few videos that show some parents in their moment, in their zone with their little ones, doing OWL, observing, waiting, and listening. So let's just sit back and watch as these families show us how they demonstrate these strategies. Let's notice as well the impact on the child.
You like that, don't you? Yeah. Do you want to tickle again? Yeah, I can tell. Here goes. Tickle, 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 tickle. You're so ticklish, Piper. Yeah. Tickle, 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 tickle. Oh, you want it again? Here comes the tickles. Tickle, 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 tickle. Yeah.
does this mom owl, and what is the impact on this little one whose name is Piper? That is really noticing how mom immediately responds to Piper whenever Piper does something. Lucia, what do you see?
I see mom waiting for some type of response from Piper, whether it's her eye contact or maybe Piper moving her mouth and her jaw a little bit, because that was her way of communicating. Continue to play with me. I like this game. It's really fun.
Yes, exactly. It seems that Piper is really responsive to mom's voice. And at the same time, mom treats all the responses that Piper shows, she treats them as purposeful, as intentional. Whether they are or not, we don't know. But mom is showing Piper that her responses have meaning, and mom is giving them that meaning. And that's how Piper will learn to associate her actions and her movements and her eye contact to have meaning through mom's interpretation of Piper's communication interactions. Let's see. We're going to look at another example, and in particular with discoverers. We talked about how, before we move on, let's talk a little bit more about the discoverers to say that for them it's going to be a little bit different because they may or may not show very clear signs that their communication is intentional, but it is in our ability to interpret and to give meaning to their communication that builds their communication. So we're going to move into the next stage and see how this with a communicator is owling, and ask ourselves how it impacts her daughter, whose name is Lara.
Aw, Puppy loves you too. Yeah, kiss.
Yeah, I know.
Kiss from the doggy. Thank you so much.
Oh, another big hug. Love it.
I love my hugs. Oh, big huggy kiss. Mwah. Kiss. Mwah. Thank you. Nice.
So how did this mom use owling, and what did we notice about how her daughter responded?
Well, one of the things that I noticed with Lara is that she really understood a little bit more of mom's words. And so every time, for example, she's like, "Oh, a big kiss," she would kiss the little wolf or the little stuffed animal. And so that was her following directions, and really simple directions, but she could understand on a different level what mom was asking of her, or the game that mom wanted her to engage in.
Is Charlie again with his mom, and we're going to get to see how mom is owling and what it's like for Charlie in this interaction.
You're gonna pour water. You hear a fire truck? You see a cat?
Yeah.
I don't see the cat. I don't see him. I think maybe he went home. Yeah, maybe.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, cat.
So we know that Charlie is a first word user from before. We know that Charlie is a first word user from before, and we can see that mom is absolutely owling. Like, even her body posture, her observation was very obvious, and how her head was tilted and she was looking right at him. Is there anything else that you observed that could show how she was observing, waiting, and listening?
One of the things, and kudos to mom in this video, where at the very beginning, he was distracted. He was looking past her. I don't know, maybe it was a car or someone walking, but he was clearly distracted. Instinctively, as a mom, what I would have been was like, hey, Charlie, 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 to get his attention. But she knew that he needed that moment of pause, and she was just waiting, just observing. And as soon as there was a break, that's when he was like, oh yeah, this is what I really want to be doing. And that's when that back and forth engagement really started happening too.
Yes, one last video. This is Basil and his mom, and let's see how she engages with him as a combiner. So,
W. So go back. Mommy goes first? Yeah. Okay. The car is down. The car is down. You go. Where is your car first? It's here. See this? I think up. Okay. Up, and it goes down through the slide. No, I can see this one. Oh, the elevator. It's an elevator. Elevator up. Okay. And the car says up.
So for Basil and his mom, when you observe, how is it that she is observing Basil, you can see that she has an active little one, but brings herself down, right? She makes that face-to-face opportunity by bringing herself down to his level. And is there another way or other examples that you can say about how this mom used observing, waiting, and listening with her combiner?
Yeah, just even repositioning herself from, right now, just seeing her being really higher, a little bit, even on the floor, a little bit higher than where his attention is. She repositioned her body and her head to just get even a little bit lower, almost as if they're in that play space together, almost as if they're in that little garage together playing.
Yes, exactly. She kept moving, kept getting lower, and really keeping that face-to-face going. It's such an important piece. She also was really great at waiting to give him the chance to start the conversation. Right? She didn't jump right in. She allowed him to lead her in that conversation. So observing and waiting was very clear. Of course, she's also listening to what he's saying and responding to that instead of, again, changing it or taking over. And we heard Basil was impacted. He'd used many 2 and 3 word combinations with that interaction. Final question is, how can we remember to owl with our children at home? With all that's going on around us and how busy we are, how can we remember? Is there some way that you can think would be a reminder for you?
I think one big reminder for me is, especially right now in this pandemic, is if I hear my child and it's clear that they're trying to get my attention, instead of continuing to do whatever I'm doing that is important, maybe in that moment, it gives me an opportunity to remind myself to take that pause and physically move my body and at least face my child in order to be able to, at the very least, observe, watch, and listen to what their needs are or what they're trying to communicate in that moment. Yeah,
that's true, Lucia. Just taking that moment to remember to stop. Sometimes what we're doing. I would even say, that the acronym itself, the OWL, just that owl, thinking of the visual of the owl helps me to remember something, even putting a picture up or writing the letters owl on a little note would help me to remember something that I wanted to remember in my day. So any ways that you have thought of or shared are great ways. Sometimes just being aware of something new helps us to put it into practice. So at this point, it's about practicing. We will continue this conversation in the months to come, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. So that's another way to continue to find ways to practice at home, is by really adding support and by having some more conversations with other parents, with your teachers, with other family members, to help each other to remember to use observing, waiting and listening so that we can follow our children's lead as they interact with us.
I do have an idea of how we can remember owl.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do owls say? Who? So when you need to observe, wait, and listen, when you literally have to pause the moment in whatever you're doing in that moment, you take that pause, and as you're turning and facing the direction of your child, continue to take that breath, like a really good deep breath, and you inhale, and then whoo, to be able to remind yourself, one, to breathe, breathe a little bit deeper, but then go ahead into these owl strategies, so then you could be a lot more present for your child in that moment. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. We can all practice being owls.
There you go.
Love it. Available actually next week. We'll be doing the same conversation in Spanish, and we will be available every month. First Wednesdays of every month in English, and the second Wednesdays of every month in Spanish from March to June this year, to do many different topics around communication, learning, and interaction for MNC's family chats. And to receive any questions that might come to you, sometimes when you're practicing something new, or you're really, going live and engaging with your child, something might come up and you might think of a question. So please feel free to email us at chats@linguisticconnection.com. We would be happy to hear from you. And again, if you might have from this topic to the next month, the first week and the second week in April. And last but not least, I want to make sure that you understand that we are super grateful for you, your time, your energy, and really your courage to learn something new and to practice together with us here in this community, and that you're really making a huge difference for your child and all the children that you might interact with, because these are valuable foundational skills for communication, learning, and interacting in the world. So thank you for being here. We really value you.
Yes, thank you so much. We appreciate your time. Thank you.